Hi Ty, and hi everyone at the Forbidden World Film Festival. We're so honored to be recognized as the closing film for the film festival. It's my first time as a filmmaker closing a festival, and it's the 40th anniversary of Forbidden World. And to my left is my wife and composer of Forbidden World, with a completely original score. And it's been released twice on LPs. Here's the second one, which has original artwork. And it's also on blue vinyl. And here she is recording the vocals.
There were 3 studio musicians who were called often to go in on film scores, and they played synthesizers. So it was kind of like a hot upcoming thing to be a synth pro. And so I interviewed 3 of these people, and one of them turned out to be as a 10 or 11-year-old on Star Trek. And his name is Craig Huxley. And so he had a lot of sort of, outer space experience as a child. But also a really fine musician and really hot on the synthesizers. So I chose him and went into his studio, and at that time we didn't have notation like we do now. That was digital, so everything was written out on score paper. So I went in there and I learned so much about synthesizers because he had some really cool sounds, and I got to play most of it. So his studio, though, had this really amazing thing called the blaster. There was this super long metal beam, and it was strung with piano wire. And he had like a drum, like a big metal drum about this big around, and he would drag it across it, and it would just like roar. So that was a really fun sound effect that we had. And I used my voice as kind of like a sound effect at various times.
Can you give an example?
How about, or, I don't know, I did some kind of vocal things like more instrumental, like, and sort of like, theremin-like a little bit. And what else did I do?
You were the mutant's mother.
In the film?
Yeah. When Earl opens the locker room, that's your picture there.
Yeah, that's true.
She died before the movie started. So speaking of how the movie started, I was in my second term for Roger. My first was editing 2 movies for Julie, Candy Striped Nurses and Crazy Mama, which Jonathan Demme directed. And I showed Roger my movie at the American Film Institute that I made during the same time, based on a short story by Roald Dahl called Skin, and he only fell asleep once during it, and I reached over and raised the sound and woke him up. And in any event, I walked outside with him, and I was a pretty severe stutterer then.
Especially with authority figures.
So we walked outside, I was carrying my film can, and I said, Roger, can I do... And he said, thank you very much, Allan, I'll see you later. So I watched my future with him disappear as he walked across Sunset Boulevard into the sunset. I went off to become an action editor. I worked for Fred Weintraub. I cut movies in Hong Kong at Raymond Chow Studios, and I cut it in the Philippines and at Warner Brothers. And I wanted to get back. I wanted a really good movie, and so I wrote Roger a letter asking him to recommend me to Coppola, who had just started Zoetrope. He was doing a movie called Hammett, directed by Wim Wenders, and Roger responded by saying, I haven't talked to Coppola in a while, but I'm doing my biggest movie ever, Battle Beyond the Stars, and will you edit it? And after I saved the movie in the editing room, and that story is in my book, Celluloid Wars, I kept a journal every night to evaluate everything, to do the best that I could to have a good movie. part 2 of Celluloid Wars, which will be out next year, is based on my nightly journals as the director on Forbidden World. But after I finished Battle Beyond the Stars, Roger asked me 8 times to cut Galaxy of Terror. 8 times I said, Roger, I've done everything for you as an editor. I want to direct. And he finally said, can you stutter and direct? And I said, I still stutter when I'm directing. It's less because I'm in charge, but it's in the act of communicating, which is more than most directors do. And he said, Allan, I'm going to put you through the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking. And so that involved doing second unit on a car movie, then additional scenes for a kung fu movie. And then on Galaxy of Terror, the spaceship set was available on a Sunday because they had a burnt set. It was just for a burnt set on Monday. And he came to me on a Tuesday and said, you want to direct a whole movie, don't you, Allan? I said, yes. And he said, well, there's a spaceship set available on Sunday, and if you can write, produce, and direct a 7 to 8 minute opening of a space movie that can go anywhere, I'll give you a whole movie. And if you need any inspiration, I've always wanted to. Oh, and he said, I have someone came in my office with a robot uniform outfit, and I owe a movie to Jesse Vince, so I'll give you an astronaut and a robot. And if you need any inspiration, I've always wanted to do a version of Lawrence of Arabia in space. And I said, David Lean is my favorite director. And he said, well, then you should have no problem at all. So I did the first 8 minutes and then gave him treatments based on Lawrence of Arabia, all of which he said were too expensive. And then he said he wanted to rip off Alien. And he had a hot writer out of NYU, Tim Kernan. And so Tim wrote while we developed the movie, and we made Mutant. And then when it premiered, actually didn't premiere, Roger snuck the movie at the Culver Theater. And all during the editing of the movie, I instructed, whenever we had a screening for Roger, that people should never laugh, because I saw what he did with Death Race, and he took out a lot of the comedy there, and he doesn't like to mix comedy and horror. So I didn't anticipate that he would sneak it, and people were going wild in the screening, and Roger actually punched the guy who was leading some of the laughter. He stood over him like this, and he went, boom, stop laughing, this is a serious sci-fi movie. And he stood over him like this, but the rest of the audience kept going wild, and Roger said, be there in the editing room tomorrow to make the cuts, or I'll have someone else do it. And then he title tested the original title, which was Mutant, which the T-shirt is here, and we had the line where the slime ends, the blood begins. And he found out that that high schoolers at Fairfax High and Hollywood High didn't know what the word mutant meant. So he called it Forbidden World, which was the title that he had and he was saving to use. And he thought it was a tremendous title, which it is. And he made a lot of money on the movie. He couldn't repress all the comedy because the comedy outside the script was done through exaggeration. So what you're seeing tonight is still funny. Please feel free to laugh as much and talk as much as you can, and enjoy.